Hello again, everybody. This is Craig Evans of Autism Hangout, and thank you for tuning into this episode of Ask Dr. Tony, where Dr. Tony Atwood answers your questions about autism. Friends, this is indeed a troubling and anxious time in the world. There's a global pandemic going on, unemployment, protests over violent police actions, race riots, and insecurity is everywhere. So if you find yourself suffering from spiking anxiety, you clearly are not alone. Now, Dr. Tony has some helpful thoughts for both ASD and NT folks, so that's what this Ask Dr. Tony episode will be addressing. Hello, Dr. T. I know you too have felt this stress in Australia.
Yes, indeed we have, Craig.
So I've grouped these questions. Who else is an ASB watching the pandemic and is in the middle of an anxiety attack? And here's one just like that. Adult ASB checking in. Severe anxiety has started. Panic attacks. It's awful.
One of the characteristics of autism is to be actually very sensitive to the emotional state of other people. And it means that as you watch events on television, it's as though the person is like a sponge and will absorb the despair of the situation that's occurring. And of course, the media thrives on increasing anxiety because that creates, should we say, fear of what's going to happen. You need knowledge to reduce that fear. The media provides it. So the media is trying to get you hooked on the information they provide. So it is a very difficult time. Another characteristic of autism is an intolerance of uncertainty, and things are changing. That regular pattern and consistency is of concern, and often anxiety occurs at times of transition. We are in a state of transition. So the anticipation is those with autism that are by nature anxious, we would expect an increase because of circumstances.
Here's another one. Hi, I thought I could cope with this pandemic situation, but what it took away from me is my grandkids' cuddles, along with my basic routine for going out. I'm experiencing panic attacks again.
Okay, what happens if you have anxiety is you have a number of strategies to help. That can range from routine to marijuana. And what's occurring is that routines are changing, and that's going to be destabilizing. But also the events that provide you with reassurance, enjoyment, the antidote to anxiety, often contacting people and so on, is elusive. And so there is less ability to reduce the anxiety by enjoyable experiences, particularly if they involve grandchildren. As a grandfather, I can quite understand that to be away from your grandchildren and you want a hug, it does feed into anxiety because you're also worried about your grandchildren's future themselves. So, quite understandable. One of the things that are important in anxiety is someone who can help you. Now, that someone may be a pet, it may be a dog, it may be a cat, that has just the ability to absorb your anguish and help you feel better. There's also social media that can be used, Zoom and Skype, to have contact. It can be looking at an old photo album of those occasions. It can be planning at some future stage a party or a celebration or a get-together of the family and trying to go back through your memory. And sometimes what you can do is, if it's a hug from a grandchild, is actually reenact it by imagining the grandchild is there and actually putting your hands as though they were there. And that action will trigger the sensations, the tactile sensations, the olfactory sensations, the love and affection. And that's what that person is seeking, is love and affection.
Wow, that's wonderful. Dr. Tony, in dealing with people, it's harder to mask when I'm anxious because it seems like I'm working with reduced resources. So if you're stressed to begin with and you're adding more stress, how do you accommodate that?
One of the problems for autistic people with anxiety is the ability to pick up increasing levels of anxiety. It's strange. It's what we call interoception. In autism, there is an oversensitivity to external signals, auditory, olfactory, visual, external signals are explosive. But there is a lack of sensitivity to internal signals. That may be hunger or thirst or needing to go to the toilet, and includes, should we say, building anxiety, sadness, or anger. Sometimes the autistic person is the last to know they're about to have a panic attack or lose it. And sometimes it's someone else. I must admit, sometimes it's your pet, it's your dog or your cat is more aware of your imminent emotional state than you may be, or a partner or family member may notice, I think you're getting stressed, no, I'm not, I think you are. So it's listening to the advice of such individuals. And what we're trying to do is help early on when it's easier to fix, rather than having a panic attack, which is the extreme. Because once you've reached that stage, the person is almost closed down, the frontal lobes aren't being logical, the person's not being reasonable, so reason doesn't work. And so when you have a panic attack, a meltdown or shutdown, often you've just got to wait till the energy or the emotion has naturally gone. Now, what we're trying to do increasingly is help an autistic person be aware of their internal signals. This is why I become increasingly encouraging of yoga, meditation, and mindfulness to be able to pick up the signals of, I'm stressed. But another one, and I've been an advocate for this for a few years, is the new sports technology that has a measure of your heart rate on a watch. And the heart rate is going to increase, but your frontal lobe isn't aware of that. So every so often you need to check, oh dear, I'm getting stressed, I need to take a break. So it's looking at the physiology, it's noticing heart rate and so on by a machine that does it for you, or trusting animals or other people that may have an insight, because an autistic person has great difficulty identifying what's going on inside. And when I talk to people with this characteristic, often they say, I have inside me a negative feeling, but I don't know what it is. This is what we call alexithymia. It's a bad feeling. I don't know whether it's sadness, anger, or anxiety. It's not nice. It's not a nice emotion. But I don't know quite what it is, which means that the person then has difficulty telling anyone what's upsetting them, what's my feeling and what's it's about. It's converting thought and emotion to speech. So it's being aware of the signals inside that this is occurring, and then the ability to communicate in neurotypical conversation, which means that the anxiety very quickly gets out of control.
And here's one that I know people in America have been talking about a lot on social media as it relates to the pandemic. I have been eating a lot.
Yes, eating is a comfort food. Yeah. And I can understand why people will do that. And sugar and junk food. Well, Craig, in our book, Been There, Done That, Try This, we asked the guys what helps. And one of the things I wasn't aware of until it came back so often was get rid of junk food. And many said my mental health was significantly better when I got rid of junk food, which was addictive. So you have someone there who's seeking comfort, enjoyable experiences, and food will provide that. But another element that's an autistic element is not necessarily having an off switch. It's not knowing when you're hungry, but also not knowing when you're satiated. And you end when the plate is finished and there's nothing there, rather than that I'm full. And I'm going to say a thing about America here. America is incredibly generous with its portions. Yes. And sometimes when I was there with my wife, we would order one meal and share it between the two of us because there was so much. It's your generosity actually is a problem.
These are a bit more concerning. Can I trust the police? When I'm scared, I can't think or talk. What if I get stopped by a policeman? Unfortunately,
police are now associated with confrontation and vulnerability, including a policeman could kill you. And it's understanding what are the social conventions and rules when I see a policeman. This isn't a teacher. This isn't a family member. This is someone with authority and power. And I'm not sure what the script is of what I'm supposed to do. Now, the script is what the police say, please do, and don't challenge. Now, an autistic person finds that's very hard to do because they are self-appointed revealers of the truth. If this is illogical, inappropriate, they will often refuse to do it, which is not what the police are anticipating. You can't challenge it. Yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir, whatever it is you say, I will do. Get this situation over with as fast as possible. But if you are going to argue with a police officer, not do what they say, then the consequences could deteriorate. But this is where, if you have autism, is to talk to somebody about any issues that you have that may lead to confrontation with the police, and then go through a script and rehearse what to do. And that's what I would suggest.
I know at one point in time there were companies that were manufacturing cards that people could carry that said, I am a person on the autism spectrum. These are things that you need to know about me. And what I'll do is I'll look that up and I'll put that information on the bottom of the screen so people could contact them.
Now, I will add something to that, though. You must tell the police officer you're going to put your hand in your pocket for a card, because they may think you're going to get a weapon.
Yes.
Or you may say, in my left-hand pocket is a card, please take it from my pocket. Because otherwise, if you just go into your jacket to find something, they may consider you're looking for a gun and they will shoot you.
Yeah. Keep your hands where people can see them.
Exactly.
Okay. This is also a concern. My OCD is unbearable, and now I don't even feel safe going out. This is impossible. Could you offer them some hope?
Okay, what I've been talking about are sort of mild psychological strategies to cope with the situation. They have their value, but they don't have great strength. When you have OCD, it's actually a very significant mental health problem, and you need professional help from a psychiatrist, clinical psychologist, and a range of approaches. Sometimes medication can help. Sometimes cognitive behavior therapy and a range of strategies. So OCD has taken anxiety to a level of clinical importance. And it would be incredibly difficult of you to overcome OCD on your own. You need a team and a variety of resources to help you. A plan, strategies. What are the triggers? How can you cope with the situation? Let's take something that's reasonably easy to cope with, a little bit of anxiety. Out of 10, it's a 1. Let's have a program. Let's overcome all the situations that create anxiety. Level 1. Great, we've done it. A hierarchy. Let's try level 2. Let's go up the hierarchy. Don't start with the most feared situation. Let's work through that hierarchy.
And then you gain confidence along the way.
Yes.
Okay, so for every dark cloud, there are silver linings. And it's interesting because several people have written in talking about some of the positive things that they found through the pandemic. So we'll just call them the silver linings category. I went shopping today. It was the best shopping experience I've ever had. It was quiet, organized. There were rules of us staying 2 meters apart. There were not many people around. It was fantastic. I just wish it wasn't under these circumstances. But silver linings.
Yes, indeed. Life has become more autism friendly.
Yes.
And the social distancing, which is good. Actually, to be honest, when you look at some of the things that an autistic person finds difficult to cope with, one is crowds. Consistently, I found that the person really hates crowds. Those have gone. If you're in a shopping mall, the bright lights and all those other things are a bit upsetting. But what adds to that is people walking close to you and talking and so on. You don't have that. So you can, in a way, be actually calmer. And also, if you are contacting people, it's sometimes through Zoom or Skype and computers. And it's a lot easier to say goodbye by just switching it off rather than trying to go to the door and things like that. So I think there are some aspects that in future, after COVID-19, people have had a taste for social distancing. And I think this will become a new part of our culture. And autistic people will be saying, hooray, good, at last.
In fact, you mentioned Skype and Zoom. This was a comment that came in from I believe it was YouTube. Skype and Zoom is perfect for autistics. We do that in our community. You do whatever you like to do at home. This is what autistics love to do anyway. Follow your special interest or start and learn a new craft. I wanted to get into leatherworking, but unfortunately my tools have not yet arrived. Or you can finally read all the books you have on your mile-long list. Actually, the time spent at home, not having to go to work or not having to socialize, it's something autistics do naturally anyway. Again,
yes, I totally agree. Often in autism, there's a search for knowledge, information, and the old-fashioned crafts. If you go back a couple of hundred years, life was easier for autistic people. The pace was slower. It was quality rather than quantity. There wasn't the population density, etc. So it's an opportunity to show your abilities in imagination and intellect rather than social repartee.
The next two questions show how stress reaches into other parts of people's lives. And in this particular case, the first question here is about addiction. Hello, Craig. I'm reaching out in a fair bit of desperation. I'm a 30-year-old woman in California with undiagnosed ASD and severe PTSD. I was hoping someone can help me with my PTSD and my cannabis habit. I want to quit, but I can't work or function without it. The city that I live in is a sensory torture, and without cannabis, I end up trapped inside my apartment, racked by the flashbacks from 20 years of pervasive abuse. I'm desperate to find someone who can help me with my PTSD from an autistic perspective, and hopefully help me find other ways to handle the pain. I have things I want to do, and cannabis is stopping me. Thank you for any information or references you can provide.
Okay, there are so many dimensions for this unfortunate lady in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is hectic, high population density. Often when I'm looking at autism, it's really looking at environmental modification may be helpful. That is to be in nature, big skies, trees, animals. If you're in LA, it is hectic. It is toxic to mental health. So I do recommend seriously looking at, do you have to be in LA? Would a change of environment help? Now, other components, PTSD. In my clinical work, I'm becoming increasingly aware of PTSD in association with autism. Now, some good news here. There's a new book about to be published by Jessica Kingsley Publishers, and I wrote the foreword to it, and I think it's great. It's called Living with PTSD, A Journey Towards Understanding by Lisa Morgan and Mary Donahue. Should be published in the next month or two, but it goes through aspects of PTSD and autism that we're only just starting to realize. So for this particular lady, order a book in advance. But if you look at the life history of someone with autism, they would have had trauma in many ways. One of the most horrific forms of trauma is being rejected, bullied, and teased by the peer group. There was a 14-year-old I saw yesterday who, how shall I put it this way? If an adult did that to another adult, they'll be charged with devious sexual assault for poking a stick in his, anyway. And to have that occur, often in autism, you are the target, but the difficulty can also be, why would somebody do that? And nobody comes to my rescue. Nobody repairs me afterwards. I can't understand why. And often ruminating over those abusive experiences. So it's a wound that never heals. You never get over it. And I often find this is more in classic autism, but it also occurs in ASD level 1 and Asperger's, is you can sometimes get sudden, intense emotional reaction, almost meltdown, and you can't identify what happened in the environment to account for it. It's a flashback. It is a moment of going back to the trauma, which causes and relives the distress. For the person with autism may have difficulty in explaining what's going on because they've got the intensity of the emotion and it's a flashback. It also affects sleep, appetite, a whole range of things. Now, what matters in trauma is the person's perception and reaction and coping mechanisms rather than the strength of the trauma. But in autism, it's not a rare event. Often it's almost a daily event, and the consequence is going to be high levels of anxiety, hypervigilance, and so on. And an issue in autism of trust and safety, because it's not only a question of why would they do that, but this is somebody I trusted and they've taken advantage of me. And a characteristic of autism is to appraise people by what they say than their personality. So they can be very verbally convincing and encouraging, but they have malicious intent. Neurotypicals will go, God, I don't trust this guy. No way. No, I just sense that. And in autism, you may not have that ability. You may think people are going to be as nice and as good as you, but then you get bitterly hurt because of what may be occurring. Now, when you have PTSD, you're going to get an increase in autistic features. Many autistic features are coping mechanisms. So you'll have an increase in social withdrawal, anxiety. You will escape more into your special interest as a thought blocker. So PTSD actually increases, it doesn't create autism, but increases autistic characteristics. So there's a difficulty in communicating what's upsetting, but also a feeling that this is my life forever. In autism, there's an aversion to change. You don't like change. Change is something could be happening and I may not be able to control it, it may not be bad. I don't like change. But the other side of that is this is my life forever. I will never escape trauma or memories of trauma or flashback, which is incredibly depressing for the individual. So getting back to this particular lady, we are getting research studies looking at cognitive behavior therapy for trauma. But there's another strategy, EMDR. Now, when it first came out, people go, what? Moving your eyes? And that gets rid of trauma? Now, this is mumbo jumbo, absolute rubbish. Actually, there are now research studies, and I was reviewing the research literature a few months ago, and there are now studies on EMDR, and this was published in the Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders last year, volume 49, by somebody called Lobgrecht van Buren, 27 adults with autism, symptoms of PTSD, significant reduction of symptoms of PTSD, psychological distress and autistic features from EMDR. So that's something for people to consider. Now, I would also look at the cannabis component. And one of the characteristics of autism is to have racing thoughts. And they just spiral out of control. And certain drugs, often illegal drugs, like cannabis and heroin and morphine, can slow down accelerating thoughts. And so for the person may feel, wow, I feel cool, I feel relaxed. And this is something that we have not yet got a prescription medication that slows down the accelerating, racing thoughts that occur in autism, which prevent sleep, are very hard to keep in control. Now, I think the person is right to look at gradually reducing the cannabis, but it's easier said than done. It's reducing it bit by bit. But it's also looking and asking her, what does cannabis give you that you need? Can you achieve that by other strategies? But I would also go back to my original point, is you're using, in inverted commas, medication to adapt to an aversive environment. And I would seriously look at moving, and then you might not need cannabis to cope. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
Actually, there's something I can add to that. I saw in the news here in America about 3 days ago, the housing and rental prices in downtown cities in California have been plummeting because of people being able to work from home. Working remotely is one of these things that will continue after the pandemic because it's so efficient right now. People talk to their doctors online, people report to work online, they submit their work online. So it's possible for this woman maybe someday to actually live remotely and avoid the stress of the city, which is causing her this anxiety. This is another one to do with addiction. My son was recently diagnosed with ASD at age 38. He's highly intelligent, a qualified engineer, and he bravely soldiered on with his license graduation. But unbeknownst to us, he was drinking almost daily after work, and he's now an alcoholic. He's currently unemployed. He's now living with us as we fear for his safety. There seems to be nothing out there on how to help adults with ASD and addiction. He's had many, many hours of one-on-one counseling and group therapy and rehab, but to no avail. We're just grateful that he's not suicidal. At least he hasn't told us. What can we do as he's seriously struggling, very depressed, and hates himself?
Very good question. We're starting to realize more and more in alcohol and drug dependency services, the research and clinical experience would suggest that 1 in 4 have an autism spectrum disorder, often not diagnosed. The question is, why is there an association between autism and addiction? Often it's a variety of reasons. It's a way of regulating emotions. It's being accepted by a particular group and culture, especially if you felt that you've been alienated from other people. And it's a way of creating a bubble of, I don't care, comfortably numb. I'm not concerned about my lack of friendships. I'm just enjoying the relaxation and the moment. It's that mañana, tomorrow, well, that's tomorrow. I now feel content. And it's someone who may have not have had contentment in other ways. Now, there is literature starting to occur on this. One of the first books that came out by Matthew Tinsley, published by Jessica Kingsley Publishers, Asperger's Syndrome and Alcohol, Drinking to Cope. And that's why the person does drink, to cope with life. It works. But also another new one that's come out, Drinking, Drug Use and Addiction in the Autism Community by Elizabeth Kunruther, oh dear, and Anne Palmer. I can't pronounce it. Sorry, Elizabeth. But that's another resource. Now, the thing is, the services, a therapy for alcohol and drug addiction, are designed for neurotypicals. And often they're in group, and often those with autism say, I don't do groups, I can't relate to the other people's problems. There's also alexithymia, the difficulty in converting thought and emotion to speech. What were you feeling just before you had a drink? I don't know. Come on, what were you feeling? You're not really engaging with the therapy. No, it's alexithymia. It can't tell you. That's why we've got to use art, music, a whole range of things to get through to the challenge of expressing inner thoughts and feelings in any other way than speech. So it also means that the person may benefit from a mentor, a guardian and a guide who's been through the same process, but is also on the spectrum. Mm-hmm. And they can support each other. Mm-hmm. In my own family, there is someone on the spectrum who is an addict. And in going through one of the rehab environments, he found another addict, and they become great friends. Mm-hmm. And they support each other better than any psychologist, because they understand each other, they've shared the same experiences and so on. So I think your 38-year-old son needs to find someone who's been through the process, who speaks autism, who knows what it's like and can be encouraging. Your son also needs to be able to cope with life by other strategies. The thing is, by taking alcohol or substances, it's a quick fix. It's no effort. You just swallow or inject. Whereas these strategies are going to require time and patience and so on. So it's encouraging and motivating the person to use psychological strategies and the skills as an engineer. So he gets pleasure and enjoyment by success, shall we say, in terms of a career or possibly relationships. So those are my thoughts regarding that 38-year-old young man.
So as you can see, the anxiety present in the world is affecting lots of people in many different areas. The last area is relationships, intimacy, dating, sex, and marriage. And this woman that wrote this is referencing a video that we did a while back. Your special versus intimate friends video said that it was the person's intelligence that was the attraction. My ASD husband claimed that his female coworker was someone that he just liked talking to as a friend, and he had no romantic feelings or desire to have sex with her. But then, why did he buy her a bracelet, which was inappropriate? Please answer this for me, because I'm having a breakdown over this. I can't understand it. I'm losing it. Please help me.
Right. First of all, for a neurotypical, to buy somebody such an expensive and personal gift is an indication of quite considerable intimacy intentions. The problem in autism is the person doesn't get that, and they often don't know when they buy someone a present, what shall I buy them? He's bought a present which was expensive and is important as a measure of the friendship, but not necessarily an intention to lack fidelity and have an illicit relationship with this person. His difficulty is, she's really nice, I like her, I value her in my life. I would like to express the value she has in my life by a gift. What would be an expensive, appropriate gift for a woman? A bracelet. And that may well be his thinking. Not necessarily seduction. It's more likely to be he wanted to buy her a genuine present, and his wife is misinterpreting it as though he was NT, not autistic.
Well, I guess we can offer that woman hope, and I hope she has enough patience to see this through.
I hope so too. Yeah.
That's all the questions we have this time, Dr. Tony. So thank you once again for answering these questions.
I think they were excellent questions, and I enjoyed an opportunity to give my thoughts.
Good night, everyone.